Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the first ever Pocket Mastermind live Q&A. Thank you to anybody who's online watching, and also thank you to everybody who is on our panel. The plan today is we're going to cover off some discussion around the impacts that everybody's facing as part of the COVID-19. The panel are going to share some of their experiences running their own businesses, how it's impacted them. We've got Hayley with us today who's going to help provide some guidance on where to find useful information. So with that, I'll ask the guys to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the discussion. So I'll start with you, Nick, as you are top of my screen.
Hi everybody, I'm Nick Dickinson. I run a business called Nicholas John. It's business development and strategy consulting. I specialise in retail and technology with a strong emphasis on direct to consumer and e-commerce solutions. My background and experience comes from senior positions held at Asda, Virgin Media and Sony PlayStation.
Thank you very much, Nick. Next, we'll go to you, Julia.
Hi there, thanks for having me on. Feel quite honoured and privileged to be a part of this group. So I co-founded tech consultancy in 2008, right before the last financial crash. And then last year I started another company. So I seem to be doing very well in starting businesses in the beginning of a crisis. So I started Strong Ambition Method. Basically, I knew I wanted to help women sort of have a senior career, and explored various avenues that I could potentially do that. And something that was very, very important to me, and something that I've been very interested in, is health and mental health. So I focused on sort of helping these career ladies move from tired all the time to having sort of sustainable energy to really exceed at a senior level within their career. And the 12-week program that we came up with, working with sort of lots of fitness and health experts, was strength. So strength training over 12 weeks, was nourishment. So looking at their sort of nutrition, making sure they get everything they need. And what I will say is probably the most important element is sleep. It's just making sure that you sleep. You can't function properly on 6 hours sleep a night. So I'm sort of really going to hopefully give a couple of tips today just on what you can potentially do in this new normal to help with your health and mental health. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I lost my mute button for a second there. And I was just watching all the people that are currently watching us live, which is good news. Steve, you are my top right. I'll ask you to speak.
I'm Steve. I'm Dave's brother. We founded Pocket Mastermind together, which is this group that we've got together here. I currently work for a software company that do software on CCTV, which means taking the footage off-site and protecting any recorders from being stolen or anything like that. So yeah, looking to learn from all these guys that we've got here, like the guys watching up. Cheers.
Thanks, Steve. On to you, Danny, please.
Hi, I'm Danny Dixon. I background 25 years in mobile telecoms, so operating at sort of various senior levels. I met Dave when he worked in the sort of corporate side of things as well, when they were doing some work for 3, which was my sort of last corporate employer. Since leaving 3 in October last year, I've set up my own business called Portivo, which is a startup, I guess, and really at the start of the startup journey, but looking to provide sort of senior level consultant services or consultant services right through the business on a sort of package statement of work type basis to try and productize consultant services, and I guess in time democratize how freelancers can engage with work and how businesses can engage with freelancers as well. So again, like the others, I'm very pleased to be part of this group, and looking forward to contributing to that.
Brilliant. Cheers, Danny. Over to you, James, please.
So thanks, Dave. My name's James Tompsett. I have worked in sales recruitment for the last 16 years for 2 businesses. I was a director of a large sales recruitment company based in central London. And then 4 years ago, myself and Martin Evans, who's also on this podcast, set up P60 Recruitment, which is, again, predominantly a business-to-business sales recruitment company. And we touch on off the back of the success we have with our clients, we then sort of work on other types of positions within businesses as well, which includes marketing and operations and some technology roles as well. And that's what we've been doing for the last 4 years. Thanks, Dave.
Cheers, James. Conveniently straight on to Martin then, please.
Morning, everyone. So I would obviously set up P60 with James. 4 and a bit years ago, we started with 3 of us in a box room and have grown the business, which we think very successfully. And I've got a team of 8 consultants. We set up P60 because we believe there was a better way to do recruitment. It was around communication, qualification, and just providing exceptional levels of customer service to our clients. Thanks.
Good stuff. Wayne, as if you can't tell by the sponsorship over his shoulder.
Hi, I'm Wayne Daniel. Thanks for inviting me today, Dave. So essentially, I own a marketing agency called Wayzoo Marketing and PR with my partner and a couple of specialist contractors. Literally about 18 months ago, I decided, having done a couple of side projects, that I wanted to go and work for myself and concentrate on the areas of marketing and PR that I loved and was excited by, as opposed to the chase the dollar, sale environment that I was currently locked in a downward spiral in. So for me, this is quite an exciting opportunity to get my name and the business out there. We have a good roster of clients at the moment. Obviously, due to COVID-19, we are dealing with our own challenges at the moment. But we specialize in lead generation, website design and optimization, PPC, logo and design development, and all the other good stuff that makes an integrated marketing agency. And one of the things that I'm looking to provide today is there's a lot of people who come through to me for unpaid advice, asking what they should do now that the high street's shut as a business, and they are now having to move from being a word of mouth company and getting all their trade from passing footfall to competing in the online digital market space. Some of them are a bit late to it. Some of them don't have the right tools to compete in that space. So it's been quite interesting for me from a marketing perspective to be able to provide advice and also obviously pick up some clients who are looking to come into this space.
Thanks, Wayne. I think you touched on something that we'll talk a bit more about coming up around how we see business changing. Over to you, Hayley.
Hi, I'm Hayley. I'm a chartered accountant. I set up my own firm about 4 years ago. We're based in Oxfordshire. We're far from a traditional accountancy firm. We're quite proud of that. We're quite forward thinking, embrace technology, really focused on clients growing their businesses, providing lots of workshops to do that, doing lots of business advisory. At the moment, that's kind of turned into sustaining business rather than growing business, although there's still lots of work out there for them. So yeah, we're just having to offer loads of support at the moment so that people can get through this, but really enjoying that. It's quite rewarding. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much. Louis?
Hi guys, I'm Louis. I look after or have founded a company called Pass This Pass, which focuses on digital and social selling, with the end game being to work with people that are currently in the prison system or have just left, to give them a foot in the door in the world of sales and marketing. Cheers.
Very nice. You've been working on that elevator pitch, haven't you?
I'm not going to lie, I definitely have done.
And last but not least, Denise.
Hi, thanks for having me. So my name's Denise. I have been in recruitment for the last 10 years. I've worked for some really well-known employers in their in-house talent acquisition teams. And then last summer I was made redundant and made the decision to go it alone. And what I really wanted to do was to help candidates navigate job processes and help them understand how they could best present themselves to employers and give them a greater chance of success. So at the end of last year, I started the CV clinic, and it's really about helping people understand kind of what their career objectives are, helping them to rewrite their CVs, also optimize their LinkedIn profile, and I also offer interview coaching as well. So I'm really hoping that today, if there are any job seekers or people who've recently found themselves redundant due to the current situation, if they have any questions about what they can be doing at this time, then hopefully that's something I can help with.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody. And thank you all for giving up your time to join this conversation today. We've had numerous conversations between all of us over the last few weeks, and I know that everybody is being impacted in some way by what's going on with COVID-19. And I think that's probably a good place to start, really, is to start by sharing some of the challenges that you guys have faced or your clients have faced, and what really have been the obstacles you've had to overcome in the short term, and any kind of advice or guidance you could give for other people that are currently in a similar position that may be overwhelmed with all of the challenges they're facing, the information that's available. So I'll hand it over to one of you guys, whoever wants to kick off first. Dive in. Go for it, Wayne.
So what I've been experiencing personally, as well as clients, is that there's a lot of misinformation out there from the government in terms of what they can claim, what they're entitled to, what their employers are entitled to. So people are generally holding their cash and their resources. And obviously one of the first things that companies like to cut back on in times of austerity or uncertainty is marketing and PR. So what I've been trying to do with clients is to just basically articulate a very simple plan to them of the things that they need to be doing in this type of environment. They need to be increasing their online profile and focus. They need to be engaging with audiences who they hadn't previously been privy to, and also look at revenue generating streams. So, for example, I've got a couple of clients who are basically high street providers of services. They've now had to shut those services, and it's trying to get them to think in a more social media friendly way. So one of them, for example, has a good audience on Instagram and TikTok, but they don't see it as revenue generating. Whereas I see it as a way of getting brand awareness, getting some kind of brand perception as to what you do and how you operate as a service. And also they are able then to record snippets about their services and their products and get those out to the marketplace. They can then combine that by updating their website, making their website a lot more sticky, so that when people come to the website, there's actual content on there for them to absorb, whether that's case studies, whether it's videos around what they're doing, or whether it's new product release stuff that they've got planned in the pipeline. And also just on social, keeping things as humorous as possible in what is quite a challenging and uncertain time. So just in a nutshell, so clients are trying to get them to look at what are the revenue streams. Don't be spending 30, 40, 50% of your day on administrative stuff that isn't going to generate you any revenue in this tight time period. Also, go and look at how you look online, on your website, on your social channels, on the emails that you send to different companies and prospects, and see what you can do to improve that experience. And also with existing customers, what I've found that they've appreciated is I've got them to go out there and get their advocates. So the people who enjoy their services and enjoy their products, get them to go to Google and give them a star rating, get them to leave a review on their website and go to Trustpilot. So it's trying to get them into a different mindset that the high street is shut. No one's coming in for a haircut. No one's coming in to buy these trainers. But what can you do in the interim? You can either be down in the dumps and shut down your business, or furlough yourself and actually do nothing, or you can see this as a good time to either get online or increase your online presence. That's what I'd say the main things are, Dave.
Good advice. One thing I saw actually last night, I think I've been on the One Show, was Matt Lucas working with, he's friends with the CEO of Leon, and they've been quite clever and thought outside the box, and they've put a Just Giving page together to raise money. People can donate, and companies like Leon will then take that money and donate food to key workers, NHS workers, and the like, which means that Leon and the food providers, which are obviously currently having their business decimated by the lack of trade, are able to generate some income, but then they're also benefiting key workers who are otherwise working very long shifts, very tired, challenged for cash or whatever. So it's a good mutually beneficial idea that someone's come up with outside of the box. So I would highly encourage people to think laterally in these circumstances.
It's difficult, isn't it? You have to try and pivot quickly in this kind of scenario. It's not like 2008, which kind of crept up over a 10 or 12 month period. It certainly happened for us over 2 weeks. Literally over 2 weeks. We went from a full client base to 10% of a client base, I would say within a fortnight, maybe even shorter than that. And probably similar to Wayne, one of the first things that goes in this type of market is, marketing, and alongside that probably recruitment and headcount and everything. And that's not to say companies don't still have headcount. They're just frightened to commit to contracts and make appointments and things like that because they just don't know how to kind of navigate that in this market. Our clients have definitely fallen into one of 3 categories. So businesses who are still pressing ahead, they're quite forward thinking, they're quite creative, they've used that kind of technology before, nothing's new to them. They might have made appointments that are overseas and stuff like that, so they're quite comfortable with this type of scenario. And then we've got other clients who just categorically don't want to hire. They don't need salespeople at the moment because we predominantly recruit salespeople. They don't need salespeople at the moment. Even if they had salespeople, they couldn't put them out to sell, and their current sales team have already been furloughed. So that's another scenario. And then the third category that our clients have fallen into are businesses who still want to hire, still have a need to hire, but just need educating and need help on how to go about that. They've not used video conferencing before, or video interviews. They've never onboarded anyone virtually. And that's not to say that they're adverse to it, but they've just never had to do it before. And they just want some help and education around how to go about that effectively, which I'd like to think, Martin, we're kind of helping them with, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it is just an education thing, making people that can adapt to the current climate, using the technology that is around them, and just trying to be creative. But I think a lot of it, I agree with Wayne, a lot of it is mindset. It is people that are prepared to, right, this is life, the world's got to carry on, let's make it happen. We are in business, first and foremost, to make money and then service our clients, and we have to do that regardless of what happens. So we have to find a way to continue. And it's been challenging, but positive. And fingers crossed it gets better.
I think that's right, isn't it? I think that, in these times, and what is very interesting, and it'd be interesting to get some, maybe Haley's view on this from a sort of finance perspective, but you see a lot of businesses with quite a low cash to asset ratio, and we're seeing businesses effectively fail quite quickly, some of the larger businesses in this period of time, because their cash is drying up. Now, the key thing, though, around this sort of sustainability side for me is, consumer demands obviously change, but many of them still exist. The question is then how can we, as people who are either running big businesses or working in business, how can we then pivot to address what is effectively, very quickly emerging or drastically emerging, consumer demands that are changing, to keep us all in business, I guess, from a sustainable perspective. I think because the worst scenario that can happen is, businesses do nothing. Revenues generally fall faster than cost does. They potentially then fail as a result of it. And then when this situation is over, we've got significantly reduced competition in the marketplace. and also there's been a lost opportunity. So I think, you know, for businesses that can, obviously some really can't, but for businesses and people that can have a bit of a rethink about what they provide, how they provide it, when they provide it, and how can they then adapt to this situation, you know, use this time to be able to do that and to respond, even if it's not core to what you do normally.
Yeah, well, we've been working with a lot of clients and trying to get them to change how they make money. So, for example, we've got photographers, and they're moving into, you know, they can't go out and do family shoots. So, you know, one of them started doing an online photography course for kids. And it's just looking at where the need is at the moment. You know, people are at home with bored children. So it's trying to kind of find something to fit those needs at the moment. You know, like all the restaurants that are doing takeaways now instead, coaches and counsellors that are doing it, and tutors that are doing online courses. It's just about trying to carry on doing what you're doing, but in a different way. And I know it doesn't work for everyone. You know, I've got a lot of construction clients. A lot of them are just kind of offering their services as a man with a van. So they're not making anywhere near as much money, but they're still able to do some sort of business and actually stay relevant. And I'm kind of telling them all, the ones that help in this time and the ones that kind of, you know, like Wayne was saying, keep their social media presence up, are the ones that probably come out of this the best. Even if they've not made much money during that time, you know.
Yeah.
Or you know, if they have got spare time, I've been telling them to kind of look at all their processes, you know, come up with strategies for the future, you know, really make the most of having this time to step back and think about your business and be creative again.
Well, that's the key thing, isn't it? It's an opportunity to, assuming that they haven't got extreme short-term cash flow problems, which, as you say, to pivot and to generate some income, even if it's not the same level of income that you're expecting. But then this opportunity that I've found is the opportunity to think about what I want. I mean, I'm still at the very start of a startup journey, but what I want my business to be, you know, and sort of spend some productive time on that has been a real opportunity. Sort of that creativity seems to flow because you've got that mind space, if you like, to be able to do it.
Because you can get lost in the day-to-day, can't you? You know, when you're really busy and you kind of forget where you're at. And so it's time to reflect, I think. But yeah, cash flow is really key at the moment. I mean, it always is. But we're doing that as well with everybody, kind of really drilling down into their cash flow on a weekly basis to identify where they're going to need some more help and kind of scenario plan.
I've started paying some of my invoices early. If I'm getting the cash in from a client and I'm paying somebody else, I've even sort of paid some of them early just to try and keep the cash moving. Obviously, I've got to make sure I've got my own cash flow, but I'm not holding money back. I'm trying just to make sure that does flow through for other people as well.
Well, we're all contributing to the economy, aren't we? So if we all stop, then the economy is just going to stop. So
I think that's key. Then I think this has given us as a business a real opportunity to reflect on what we spend money on. I mean, I would say we're quite lean anyway, but it's really given us an opportunity to understand where we waste money or where we can cut back. And it's also been reflected kind of home lives as well, really being able to actually identify what you spend money on. And actually it's probably given us an opportunity to save some money in the current scenario, ironically. But I think it's the only time in recruitment that's typically a bit quieter is Christmas. So that gives us our opportunity to take a step back and have a look at the bigger picture. So this has afforded us a little break in a quarter to go, right, let's have a look. Is there anything that we can do to improve it? And when we do get back all firing on all cylinders, what's the opportunity going to look like then? So
that's the key. When, not if. That's the mindset, isn't it?
Yeah. Everyone keeps talking about the bounce back, but yeah, like I echo what Martin says. We probably, like you say, you get caught up doing the day job and neglect little things like keeping your social media up to date and doing bits and pieces like that, which you just simply, or let's be honest, you should find time to on a typical sort of working week, but it just doesn't happen. So it's a good time to be able to get all your housekeeping done, so to speak, and then press ahead. And I do think if you can keep your business going and you can pivot and think quickly and manage your money properly and all the rest of it, it's not a great thing, but at the same time, if you're taking positives out of it, it does tend to cleanse the marketplace with businesses who perhaps, how can I say this positively, perhaps necessarily shouldn't be around, or you shouldn't really be calling competition. So it's not all bad. But then there's a lot of business I'd imagine that are absolutely. Denise, you must be never busier, I'd have thought, than you are now.
Sorry, say that again.
I said you must be as busy as ever in this market.
Well, yeah. So sadly, a lot of people are being made redundant at the moment, and I'm having lots of people getting in touch with me and saying, I don't know what to do. I've been made redundant, but the job market is so poor. No one's hiring. And I think it comes back to what the rest of you have been saying about kind of mindset and really using this time as an opportunity. So those people, those job seekers who kind of use this time to really work on themselves and invest in themselves are the people who are going to come out on top. Sadly, unemployment is going to be high, competition is going to be high. And in order to stand out from that competition, you really need to work on yourself during this time. So I think it's really important to take a step back and really put together a strategy for your job search, because lots of people think the more jobs I apply for, the more chance I'll have of getting one, but actually that approach doesn't work. So I've been advising people to really take a step back, really research who they want to target, who they really want to work for, what skills those employers really value, and then kind of assessing their own skill set. If there is something missing there, use this time to upskill yourself. There are lots of online courses, kind of professional qualification, even learn a language if that's something that is going to help set you apart from the competition. And then the obvious, looking at your CV and your LinkedIn profile, because that is going to be more important than ever. I always say to my clients, your CV and LinkedIn profile are really your shop window. This is really your opportunity to present what you can offer to a business. And if they can't see it in your CV or in your LinkedIn profile, then sadly you're just going to get lost. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been advising people, is just to really take stock, use this time to work on yourself. And also leverage your network as well. So LinkedIn is amazing for job seekers. I'm sure you use it lots as well as recruiters. So just really use that. Link in with people who work for the companies that you're interested in working for. Join groups, take part in discussions, and just do what you can to stay visible and increase your credibility.
I think it's a really important point that you mentioned just then, Denise, about it being LinkedIn and your CV being the shop window. So a lot of clients out there now don't really understand that we're in a different environment now. I don't think we're going to go back to normal. There's certain services that you would have gone to on the high street. You found a simple and cost-effective way to get them delivered to your doorstep via online e-commerce channels. You're not going to go back to the high street. So it's certainly super important that companies who are thinking about a website or have an old dusty website that doesn't really function on a conversion perspective, use this downtime now to look at avenues to increase their presence online and also the way that they communicate with their customers.
This situation, sorry, I was going to say this situation is definitely going to change things forever. And I was just wondering, Denise, if you've had any experience or had any inquiries or anything around candidates doing sort of video elevator pitches or anything like that to set them apart. Martin and I are in the final throes of, which sounds crazy in this market, but investing in a new product to actually do video interviews with candidates and then market those candidates either to specific opportunities where they've literally done a video interview for a targeted vacancy, or just a generic sort of elevator pitch to help market that candidate. Have you had any exposure to that? Because obviously all of this that we're doing now, for example, is now becoming much more mainstream, and companies are just going to get on board with it, I think, a lot more.
So I have had experience as a hiring manager. So when I've worked in talent acquisition teams and we've worked with a PSL of agencies, a couple of those agencies have used You know, instead of kind of sending us an email to introduce the candidate, they've sent us a video interview where they've asked the candidate a couple of questions about why they'd be suitable for the role. And do you know what? It really works really well. It's just so much more interesting than reading an email. You get to see the person and get a feel for kind of what they're like, whether they'd fit into the culture of your organisation. So yeah, I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that. And actually, I think there's definitely a place for it.
Then there's a guy called Eric Qualman who said, we don't have a choice on whether we digitally transform. It's a choice on how well we do it. And I think that's now more applicable than kind of any other time in certainly the last 20 years or what have you, whereby it's not just companies that need to digitally transform now, it's people as well. And that's kind of how people can overcome all this market uncertainty and so on, is by using digital as the platform to kind of start the conversations and start kind of putting themselves out there. And Denise, you nailed it, and Wayne, you nailed it with regards to kind of like social media presence being a gateway to open up those kind of conversations. And the great thing is it doesn't actually take that much investment in order to have the maximum amount of input or impact, when it comes to kind of advertising yourself as a potential employee, a partner, you know, and I don't mean that in the love sense, I mean that as in a business sense. And then also kind of just showing yourself to be the kind of people or the kind of person that a company would want to employ, even in these times of uncertainty. There's so much opportunity in the market, even in times like this. But what I think people also need to do is they need to maybe drop down you know, to certain levels, their arrogance and things like that, you know. And if you're forced to go down a different path, then don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Take the opportunity, because that could potentially be something that you would have never thought about in the past, but could open up more opportunities for you. So it's it's definitely an exciting time.
I'd agree with that. The clients,
go on, sorry.
I'd agree with that. The clients that we've got that work in digital transformation, for example, like selling professional services, these clients are still full bore recruiting. There is real opportunity for those types of businesses out there. So for candidates coming into the market, or even new people sort of at a graduate level thinking, what industries can I get into? They should be looking at companies that in today's market are still doing incredibly well. IT security, for example, we do lots of business in IT security. That is not going anywhere. If anything, it's just going to get worse. Working from home, anything that allows services or individuals to work from, people to be able to work remotely or work from home, or to move into that digital age, is definitely the place to sort of safeguard, kind of not recession proof, there's no such thing, but it's certainly one of the last areas to be affected, I would think.
If you think about just how you know, and this is a mindset thing, but you think about, and I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but you think about just how different, and to some extent, I don't believe in luck, but so when I say the word lucky, I sort of think, you know, it's more contextual, but to have the digital technology that we have available to us for a significant sort of part of the world, to be able to communicate in this way, to be able to work in this way. Now, as I say, it doesn't really lend itself to everybody, but your ability to go out there and certainly keep connected with people. The other thing is, you know, I agree with what was said earlier on around proactivity. You know, some people have a nervousness about reconnecting with people on, you know, things like LinkedIn. My sort of view on that, if I can maybe advice, maybe stop short of saying advice, but view on that is, you know, when I found myself leaving my employer after 14 years, and it was a bit of a change in circumstances. Now, okay, it wasn't forced by this particular situation, but it was a change. Just re-establishing connection with people, even if you haven't spoken to them for 10 years. Most people are quite open to that. They can respond quite well to it. They recognise that, you know, the conversation might be sort of, you know, edging towards some degree of opportunity creation, but don't hold back on that, because they think that it's never going to do any harm, if you like, to reach out and reconnect with people, even if you don't get a response from some people. You know, I think that mindset, the proactivity, using, you know, as we saw, using the time to be more productive and focus on yourself, and really sort of own your own destiny in that sense, you know, and try and, you know, use the what you've got around you, the tools, the capabilities, whatever it is, to to make the best, I guess, out of what is a sort of is a precarious situation, if we're honest. I mean, there's no point in ignoring that fact, but it's there is, as I said earlier on, there are things that we can all do, and if you do have the reserves to do something, that doesn't need you to earn the money in the very near term, then great, because you can spend some time thinking. If you need to earn money in the shorter term, then it is around pivoting to see how can I meet some of the demands out there that we talked about earlier on. But I definitely think the proactivity bit for me, I think, is absolutely key. If you can be proactive in this time and do the things that are within the constraints of government advice and everything else, then do those things, because at the very, very least, you'll come out of this at the other end, less impacted, I think, than what you would be if you don't.
The one point I was going to say was it's about doing things within your control. So if you look at the food service industry as an example, when you picked up on the direct to consumer piece, you've got companies that are adapting and changing quickly, and I think it's those companies like wholesale B2B food distributors who service restaurants and bars. Their business went overnight. So what they did was they switched it and did a direct to consumer model straight away. Within a week, they turned it on. So to the point raised earlier, they're adapting and they're changing, but they're doing it within, I guess, what's in their control. And they're not looking at it saying, we've lost the business. It's like, well, how do we get some more of it back? And I think that's what's going to change on the back of this, is that these businesses will realise that there is another route to market that they necessarily didn't do before.
Yeah. I think just to capitalise on your point, Nick, it'll also in the long run save them money as well. As in the e-commerce route is infinitely less expensive than it is in terms of the offline journeys. And just to follow on from what I think Danny had mentioned a little bit earlier, is in terms of picking your battles and understanding what you can actually get involved in. So some clients will come to me and go, I want to get involved in social media, but there's so many channels out there. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's Reddit, there's YouTube. Where do I start, Wayne? And then for me, it's obviously onboarding them as a client. As discussing earlier, is that really fine line between offering advice to friends and then getting into a marketing strategy. But it's looking at their business and saying, well, Twitter's not for you. Twitter is for these specific things. It's for getting product announcements out there. It's for talking about different launches. It's for X, Y, and Z. Instagram is for building a brand. So if you want to get visually stunning images of your products and your services out there, and you want to engage with a more involved online community, that's what you need to do. Facebook is where the world is. And in terms of being able to generate leads from Facebook, because Facebook knows everything about you, let's not kid ourselves, it's a lot easier channel to jump in and do lead gen. So for quite a lot of my clients, I don't sell them on this whole likes, let's get 50 or 500 likes for this. This is about having a conversation with customers, about getting your brand out there to new prospects, and crucially, building them assets that they can use as a lead gen with a form. So people will see their ad down the street, have a click through, see more about their company, but then not take them off to the website, get them to fill in a form, then get you a conversation with them. So it's finding what's best for you as an individual business. Don't try and take on the world and go, oh, I'm digitally illiterate, but I'm going to go on YouTube, I'm going to learn some courses, and I'm going to try and do this all. Because by the time you do that, this crisis will be over and you won't have really got any benefit from it. It's about finding 2 or 3 things that your business either excels at or you can excel at, and then finding out how to get the best ROI out of those, in my experience.
Yeah, and don't try and force it, right? If you are in an industry that is really difficult to sell something through imagery, perhaps don't look at Instagram as an option and put all your eggs in one basket. You know, if your clientele are, big businesses, let's say big pharma as an example, then maybe Facebook isn't the right option. That's where LinkedIn comes into it. So that's where market research, because a lot of us now are going to have a lot of time on our hands. Market research is paramount in terms of understanding where your audiences are, because one of those different methods might be completely pointless, and you might forego another. and that's where the audiences are. So it's definitely, especially if you're new in this game, market research is key in understanding where you put your time and investment to get the most on your return.
Absolutely.
Well, and surely now is a really good time for businesses to look at putting in a 3-month calendar. You know this more than anybody, is planning ahead, putting in and telling companies now if they've got that downtime, if you want to call it downtime, where things aren't as aggressive as it could be, then surely now's the time to sit and do that content, put the calendars together, put it all in place, which would mean that you can turn it on instantly when things start to kick in again. Now, that would be my angle to push people to say, if you're not, or you haven't invested enough time in your marketing or your digital content, then surely now is a better time than any to do it.
Yeah,
I agree. Especially like for us, we've got staff that are furloughed, and I think Hayley, you touched on it earlier, but it's finding what they can be doing in their downtime, and if they can be doing things like that, which is not revenue generating. I mean, is that something that we can even be doing or should be doing with furloughed staff, getting them to write copy and things like that, ready for when things do go back to normal?
I don't know, it's a bit of a grey area at the moment, and no one really knows the exact rules because they're so new. I mean, furlough's not new, but the way it's been adapted for this situation is quite new. But, you know, I think staff are allowed to do some training, so you can send them on some online training courses, things like that. I don't know about writing copy, I'm afraid. I don't know.
I think the guidance that I heard is almost like you can't do any revenue generation, but you can prepare yourself for when you come back to work. But again, it's pretty grey. When I spoke to our accountant, he's like, it might change tomorrow. Hopefully there could be some more information coming out. So I think it's almost, I'm glad you said you're not 100% sure. I think it's sort of watch this space. And I think preparing yourself for being able to come out the other end in a healthier position so you can maintain your job and keep the business running is the idea behind the furloughed staff, rather than taking something that you don't deserve, like a Premier League football club, for example.
And on that note,
the one thing I'm quite interested in seeing after all of this as well is I have a theory or a hypothesis that the idea of remote and people being having time on their own to be able to focus on the task at hand, I feel has significant productivity benefits. And I'm wondering if, I assume it will happen, that there'll be a bunch of studies done during this time to see if productivity actually is higher in terms of the amount of time people spend on productive work versus the amount of sort of, non-productive tasks, that we typically would see maybe in an office environment. A lot of the conversations that go on, I'm not sort of antisocial in that sense, but more, the stuff that doesn't actually create a productive output. And I'm sort of, I wonder if, when I was talking to Dave last week around this, we have like a typical modus operandi of work, which is your sort of nine to, let's say, 5 or 6 or whatever for those people who work a 40-hour week during the week. And actually, but there's a lot of stats that suggest that only about 40% of that time is productive time. So that means we can do all of our work in less than half of the time that we spend in the working environment. So actually, I wonder if what will emerge from all of this is an ability to work differently and smarter, such that we get the same amount of work done, but we don't have to spend as much time doing it. And therefore, I think one of the things I think that perhaps if Julia wants to comment on this, but the ability then to have a much greater work-life balance for people as well, because the same productive output gets produced, but it isn't you don't have everything else that goes around it. And I'm hopeful that one of the big shifts that we see as a result of this, as a benefit, if you like, if there can be a benefit, is that people get more used to that type of way of working, and we still see a healthy economy on the back of it.
Do you think technology's playing a bigger part now? I only say that because I recruited through the sort of 2007, 2008, 2009 credit crunch or recession, and I saw that. This is talking as a sales recruiter, so finding business-to-business salespeople. So prior to that, we had lots and lots of clients that had home-based field salespeople. So they would have a home office, and when they weren't out on meetings, they'd be back in their home office. So that was prior to the credit crunch. And after that, we saw businesses kind of change and almost revert back to wanting those people in the office when they weren't out on their meetings. So they had a greater control of their people, and they could actually monitor them a little bit closer and make sure they were getting the most amount of productivity out of them. But technology was very different back then. I mean, it's 12 years later, and things like this are a lot slicker than they were 12 years ago. So I think that might.
Yeah, I think there's a fundamental psychology sort of issue, I think, that emerges here around people. There's a sort of lack of trust, if you like. So if I can't see somebody, I don't necessarily trust what they're doing. I think that there's an odd thing that's occurring in that, and I'm not just in that situation, but in all these situations where by forcing someone to be present all the time, you're probably creating less productivity. And I think I said in a podcast recording for Dave quite recently, it takes a different style for those of us who are leaders or are leading organizations or are leading functions. It takes a different kind of leadership to create greater clarity about what's expected, because presenteeism has been proven time and time again to not create productive outcomes and actually have a adverse impact in terms of how things go on, because effectively people create more work and it's not necessarily productive work, and that creates more work for the people, and there's this chain reaction. Whereas actually, if we all can just focus on what we do well and provide that as a service, or provide that to our colleagues or clients or whoever we're working with, I think there's a real opportunity. But it does take a mind shift. It takes a mind shift for everybody in the ecosystem. Technology definitely plays a role, but I think, if we think about the way we currently work now, was built for the second industrial revolution over 150 years ago, and we're still doing it. There's more than just the technology that needs to shift, and I'm hopeful that through all of this, people find a different way to be able to engage and work and hopefully get that greater balance.
I've spoken to quite a few people, friends as well as clients, who, they're saying it's amazing. I'm not having to commute for 3 hours a day, and the benefits that's having on my life, my relationships, are so great. And I think there is going to be a shift in people's attitude towards work and what's really important to them. People are spending much more time with their children now. So I think employers, they're kind of going to be forced into changing things because that's what people now want. And I think having this time at home is going to help people really kind of understand a bit more about what they want out of careers as well.
It's kind of well overdue, isn't it? I feel like the whole working from home culture, it should be a lot more freely available. We work from home a lot, and it's all about trust, isn't it?
Definitely. I think, Julia, obviously a lot of your clients that you work with often require additional flexibility. So I think, a change and a shift in the way in which we do work is clearly long overdue for the way in which the family unit now works, right?
Yeah, and I think over the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks, I think we're all finding our feet. I think individuals and also companies. I'm finding, from being a consumer, but also what I'm seeing from friends and sort of family who are working, I'm finding the larger organizations are really struggling to pivot, particularly the ones that have a physical space. For example, the gym space. I'm seeing the larger ones, I'm sure they're behind the scenes rapidly trying to go online, but I'm seeing a lot of, the smaller organizations doing amazingly well. Because they're able to sort of pivot very quickly. And from a sort of an individual perspective, I certainly, the first week that I had my little boy at home, I couldn't figure out how I was going to make this work. And, I sort of consider myself and the business that I work with experts on habits, expert on health habits. Now, what happens when all those habits go flying out the window? Habits that you've cultivated over, all of your adult life. What happens when you're not able to, go to the gym, go to these physical places, buy the food you want, just these sort of, it's we're as individuals having to adapt as well. And I think, I think having a different home environment, massive shift initially, but now I'm finding my feet. I'm noticing my friends and family are finding their feet, and organizations are finding their feet. So I think there was just a big old mess at the beginning, where we're just trying to figure out what our message is. Can we go online? But I think I had a great, I saw a business advisor that I work with, and she just said, just simplify. And I think that it applies to organizations, it applies to businesses, but it also applies to home life. Don't expect that you're going to be able to do the homeschooling, you know, and also run a business. That isn't going to happen. You know, you've got to sort of occasionally, like I mentioned to you, Dave, the other day, I just put my son in front of the TV all day. I needed to do stuff.
We've all done that.
Exactly. That helped me get stuff done and feel more in control. And once I knew it was, you know, once I knew it was possible, it's fine. And I think in terms of health habits, I think we just have to be really careful what bad habits slip in right now. I think it's so easy. And I certainly looked for answers in the fridge for the first week, you know, because I was bored. And that's something that I've always thought, I don't do this isn't me. And I'm opening the fridge. But I think it's really important right now. We're all experiencing something shared. We're all experiencing a shared trauma, essentially. Our perception of that, our perception of that sort of shared experience is going to be different. You know, it's grounded in our own background. And I think ultimately it's quite powerful. It makes us all very real. We all have something to talk about, like the weather. This is something else we all have to talk about. But I think we have to, like I say, be careful how we treat others. They may not be, you know, be kind, as we were all going on about before all of this happened, because ultimately people are experiencing very different, you know, they're experiencing it differently. So yeah, careful. My tips are careful what habits slip in. Make sure, you know, okay, you've had sort of 2 weeks of where you're, you know, not doing anything, just panicking and figuring out how to work. That's fine. We're all doing that. But now's the time just to try and make sure you're exercising, or at least moving your body. Go out and get some fresh air. Yes. Yes.
Have you found from speaking to your clients and advisors that there's online applications or programs that they are now utilizing to increase their efficiency?
Sorry, say that again.
Are you finding speaking to clients that they are now using any online programs or apps to increase their efficiency?
So efficiency. So I would say I say lots of people are immediately going online. I would say, you know, particularly, and obviously everyone's using Zoom, and that's been, you know, pushed forward. And as we talked about the other day, altogether, the share price has obviously leapt. I'm noticing a lot of people who were very nervous about being, you know, people perhaps in my parents' generation who were nervous of going on video calls are now going on video calls. And this, I think that, you know, whereas there's a push 15 years ago to become computer literate, there's a real push, I think, now to become video literate, in that, you know, not only how we're presenting ourselves, but also how we use the technology. Does that answer your question?
No, that's all good. I guess where I was leading into is that
please expand.
A couple of clients who, from a project management perspective, are now looking at different apps. So I'm not going to name check too many, but there's apps such as Trello and Slack, which they wouldn't have traditionally used in the past. But now that they are home-based and they can get their workers and employees on these apps, it gives them a sense of structure to their days when they're working from home. So it allows them to put their employees on this application. They can see between 9 and 11, or this afternoon, Wayne is going to be working on X, Sarah's going to be working on Y. And then you have that shared community online application where you can all feed into, and that increases productivity. The reason I was kind of mentioning it is because a lot of clients have now sent 10, 50, 100 staff to work from home, and managing all of them through Outlook or an email client is impossible. So what I found is a couple of my clients have moved to these kind of applications where everyone's in there in a communal sense. They can see the projects, they can see what everyone's working on, what percentage is being completed. And then when it comes to a team meeting, it isn't a free-for-all. They can all pull up this application and then see what needs to be done and what's been completed. That's kind of in terms of the people who might be listening in. That's one of the things that I would try and get across, is it's looking at structured tools online that you can use to improve your efficiency and productivity of yourself and your staff.
We used
using Slack,
Yeah, we implemented Slack. instead of WhatsApp, basically, from an entire team. And we use it from twofold. So obviously you can have group video calls, but it really helped with kind of keeping a team together, because what we didn't want to do is disperse the team and then come back in 3 months, 6 months, however knows how long, and sort of reintroduce yourself to employees, really. So we had a morning meeting, and we've changed it now, so we're just having a lunchtime meeting. But part of that is having a sort of a lunchtime energizer, which usually involves something like a quiz or something like that, that kind of breaks up the sort of work, and just being able to kind of have a bit of fun, keep that competitive spirit between all the employees, and just make them know that we're here if we need them. Obviously, we have furloughed our staff, but we need them to know that they're part of a business, let them know what the 3 directors are up to, and just to make sure that they can kind of feel very much still part of a team-based environment. I think Slack is a great tool that we use as well.
Martin,
at least they know you're not playing golf.
This is it. Yeah.
Get on the golf course, couldn't you? Because there's no one there.
One thing I've noticed with things like Slack, though, I think there's a learning curve to be found with those tools as well, because the overuse becomes a challenge, right? We can end up with, especially in larger companies, you can end up with 100 Slacks, and then how do you find all of the information? So
you have to start setting up different Slack channels. Yeah, you have to start. We've actually, so we've got the video for the meetings, we've got Slack for sort of general sort of business chat, and then we've got a WhatsApp group for like general sort of jokes and things like that. So we've got different ways of connecting with people over different sort of subject matter. But that's fine for us because we're a smaller business. But I don't know how that would work with a massive company.
Yeah, I think it just plays onto what Julia mentioned earlier, that some of the larger companies are struggling to pivot and change their processes and organizations, whereas some of the smaller businesses have less processes, less employees, and are more in a fight or flight or fight or die scenario, so then have to adapt within quite a smaller time frame. And then, yeah, I definitely find that, just what you were saying just then, James, in terms of having someone within the organization act as the gatekeeper for something like Slack, so they can provide links to YouTube tutorials as how to use it, say these are what I see as the main benefits of the channels, and to avoid overusing it, these are the main benefits that I want from my business, you as employees, to use Slack for.
Yeah.
I think there's something around, we talked earlier on about the thinking, and, yes, there are different tools that you can use, and I use, when I ventured out on my own, I started using like Calendly and things like that to be able to then offer people opportunity just to connect directly with my diary if they wanted to book some time. So I wasn't then having to facilitate the back and forth conversation. They just pick a time that works for them. But I think overall, at the higher level, I wonder, I believe that like what we do follows the reason why we need to do it. And actually, time focusing in on what output are we looking for, or what's the outcome that we're looking for in a particular situation, I think is crucial, because to what Julius, I think it was Julius said earlier on, this idea of simplifying life. People like Steve Jobs and others were famous for saying simplicity is key, be focused on the things that are most important to you. Well, now is a time to be able to do that, and then to sort of decide, okay, even in a big organization, I work for big organizations, they're sort of like micro companies anyway. Within them, there's sort of, departments and teams, and, there's people going to be quite territorial over things. But if you can create clarity around what does success really look like for me as an individual, for the team I work in, for the things that we're doing, how can I simplify that? These big questions, then you can then decide on things like tools and things like that. Because I think the danger, like what I said earlier on, is we could end up in a situation where we go, well, everybody needs to do this now. Everyone needs to interact with a particular tool or do this, and we need channels for X, Y, Z. And all we've done is created more complexity rather than less. So I think there's something around, my view would be, take the time to think about what success looks like and just do the things that you need to do, basically. And then as you were saying there, Wayne, there might be various tools to be able to help that. But just be cautious, I would say, to almost, not try and jump in and to actually get every single productivity tool on the planet to try and help me, because that could create more problems than it solves, or create more work than is needed at a time when actually we need to be sort of managing productivity and and you know, trying to maximise opportunity in a sort of calm and measured way.
It's good. We've had some questions come in. I don't know whether you guys are able to see them as they're popping in. Some of them we've already covered off. There's an additional one here from Harseat, who commented he liked the 3-month storyboard comment from you, Wayne, about knowing your audience and market research, which platforms, and lots of things to take away from that. One question he's raised, his wife runs a kids education company, and he's asked, it might be useful to understand from the panel perspective, will you consider supplemental educational business to assist your children when schools are back on? And if so, what would you be looking for? So I think obviously everyone's homeschooling at the moment. The question really is, would you be looking, once social distancing's out the way, would you be looking for additional, is additional tuition something you may be considering? Whoever wants to jump in on that as to whether that.
Yeah, definitely. I do that now as well. My son does that now. But I think even more so because kids are going to get behind. Because even with the best will in the world, you know, they're being given all this work to do. They can't necessarily teach themselves. And, you know, we're all busy with work still. So, well, most of us are. So, yeah, I definitely would be interested in something like that. I think as well, people, you know, like we said earlier, the businesses that are kind of helping people now, the ones that are going to stay relevant in your mind. So, you know, maybe there's something that they can do, you know, offering some sort of free, I don't know, free courses or discounted courses. Because if you're looking to help, if you look as though you're helping businesses, people in this sort of time, then you are going to be remembered.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it gives you authority as well. It shows your authority that you know what you're talking about. I would definitely go after any educational programs that are entertaining for the kids as well, because trying to keep them entertained as well as trying to learn is really, really tough, and they get distracted really quickly. So I have 2 kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they're a handful, and they're trying to get them to do all of the schoolwork is really tough. And I think if you're offering things now that are free to use, like downloads or something else that you can take away, then you'll set them in front of mind in the future.
I think anything that's going to help out the parents, because I've got a 6 and a 3-year-old, and it is really challenging because, you know, I'm not a teacher. My home isn't a school. So, you know, my kids know that. And yeah, it's really, really tough. So anything that helps us parents who are also trying to work on businesses, I think, as Hayley said, will really help you be remembered.
I don't think there's been a bigger success story over the last couple of weeks, is it Joe Wicks? Is it Joe Wicks?
Yeah.
Oh yes, we've been doing that every morning.
He was like kind of semi-known if you were kind of, you know, if you're into your fitness and things like that, but he is now officially a household name, I think.
Yeah. I think it also depends on the age of your children, and just in terms of the guy was asking the question. So some of our children are more digitally literate than we are. So providing them with a couple of links to the mobile phone that they already own and telling them to revise or get onto certain learning resources is quite an easy thing to do. I've got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, and for the 10-year-old, it is quite easy to do that. For those who've got preschool children who are maybe single parents or maybe trying to run a business while manage twins, I can't imagine how they would cope in those types of scenarios. But there is a massive resource being put out there by the BBC, and just through a couple of simple YouTube searches and just from joining Facebook groups, to be honest. I've been invited into a couple of Facebook groups for homeschoolers, and the stuff that comes through there in terms of links and packages and discounts on learning tools is absolutely brilliant. So what I would say in summary is join some Facebook groups. You can always jump back out once this is all over, or if it gets a little bit too excessive, and get onto YouTube. There's a million different tutorial tutorial resources on YouTube that you can literally use for your kids. I use them for myself. I'm always learning in digital marketing, so I will go and look at a YouTube tutorial on how to do something on Google AdWords, or how to do something in terms of designing logos. So YouTube would be a great resource as well. And also just talk to your kids as well and try and understand what it is that they're interested in. They're not going to want you to provide them with what their teachers provide them with. They want something a little bit different. And there's no exams at the end of it as you as a parent, so you can make it as fun as possible.
This is a great opportunity for kids to have alternate education that isn't in the cookie cutter Victorian process, right? So a lot of kids might actually discover what they're good at and what they enjoy over this time period, and getting them back in the classroom is going to be fun.
Yeah, I've definitely faced that challenge. We've been having, so my kids are 6 and 4, and my wife works full time as well. And so when Dad is doing the schooling, the teaching is usually with a Nerf gun and the words written on the back of the kitchen door, which when they shoot, then they have to spell the word. So I'm not sure the teacher's going to appreciate that when they go back into school on a Monday with his Nerf gun. So we'll see how that develops.
The other thing I would add to that as well, I've got 2 boys, 6 and 4. One of them's mildly on the spectrum as well. So just before this call, I was on a parenting course that was being run over Zoom related to children with ADHD and mild ASD as well. So that was quite an experience. But the other thing to sort of generally sort of talk about within this particular space is if you look at what they do in some of the Nordic countries and Scandinavian countries, kids don't go to school until they're 7, in those places. So if you've got kids who are, like 6 and 4 or at that age, I'm not suggesting that we don't do anything sort of with them and just plug them in front of the TV all day, although, I'm one of those parents that occasionally needs to do that as well. But it is, don't put yourself, I guess what I would say is don't put yourself under too much pressure in these times where everyone is trying to adapt very, very quickly, and then feeling like we have to be all things to all people. Because, certainly if they're younger and they need more attentive sort of care, they'll be able to pick things back up again. Their peer group will be in a similar situation. Yes, if the services like what have been offered by the chap that asked the question, where people can get back up to speed, that's something that you want to do. But I think it's just all, just take it as it comes really, and just keep in mind that that sort of life is long, for most of us, and I think that people will have an opportunity, certainly kids, to rebound back, sort of relatively quickly. So if people are feeling the pressure, try not to put yourself under pressure, because the last thing you really want to be doing at this particular point is increasing anxiety levels and things like that for anybody.
I might teach my 15-year-old to do tax returns, because that's like kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Sounds like a brilliant idea.
Yeah, Michael's been cold calling.
If most kids are at school like I was, then they're probably not listening 50% of the time anyway. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the questions come in, we've got from Susie, and I'll direct this towards Wayne and to Louis as well, secondary. Lots of people are vying for digital space now their businesses are physically shut. How can we stay ahead of our competitors online? I think it will become even more crowded, which is absolutely right. And I think we'll lead on from this one into another part of recruitment that is also going to be crowded. I'll get Denise and Martin and Co to speak on that after.
So Wayne, do you want to go?
No, I'll happily go first. So I think it's a great question, to be honest, because as I said, it's a bit of a minefield out there. I think the most important thing to do is to own the space that is going to generate you revenue and long-term benefits. Like I said, there's no point playing in space or researching in things that aren't going to generate any revenue for you. So that's number 1. Own the space online. Also, what I've been doing with clients is, I think someone in the group mentioned research, is look at what your competitors are doing. You might hate them, you might admire them, but it's very important to see what spaces they're playing in. If they've got a rich stream of engagement on, for example, TikTok, because you're trying to get to a younger audience, then don't be afraid of that technology. Get in there with both hands, download the app and see what's beneficial for your business. In terms of getting ahead of competitors, what I think is, in terms of that market research, is what is it that your customer is actually looking for you to provide? If you're providing a physical product, but you've got a USP in that product, or you offer free delivery in that product, or you've got an extra year's guarantee, you need to be banging on about that to differentiate yourself to your audience. You also need to develop, which I obviously do as a marketing agency, compelling assets that people, everyone's at home and they're going to be online a lot more than they previously were. So as they're scrolling through their Facebook feeds or their Twitter app, you need something compelling that's going to catch their eye if you're trying to develop and adapt within that marketplace. So it's obviously, there's things that you can do in terms of copy, but in terms of color schemes, in terms of engagement activities, in terms of, I think someone mentioned before, just in terms of trivia and just having a little bit of fun with your audience to get them to engage with you is infinitely better than just going in with a hard sell. But like I say, I think it's a really good question, because there's a lot of clients out there who are saying, I'm a bit late to the online space. I've got 3 key competitors. One of them's massive and absolutely smashing it in this field. The other 2 have found a niche, and their niches might be on Facebook or it might be on Instagram. And what do I do when? So as I say, it's find the space online that works for you, where you can be an expert in. Look for things that people will find interesting. So I've got one client at the moment. He's a hairdresser. So he has a couple of salons, and he also has a hair care product. So as you can imagine, once the government forced him back into his house, he can't cut hair. So what he's been very clever in doing, obviously a little bit of guidance and advice from myself, is embracing this digital social media. So now he's got a quirky following on TikTok, where it's what he's doing in quarantine day 1, what he's doing in quarantine day 5. And yesterday I went onto his TikTok, and he actually had his cutting scissors and these hair clippers, and he was on his grass cutting the grass with his hair equipment. And obviously he was then getting a lot of feedback from his existing clients, and it obviously then becomes quite a topical, talkative point. So that's what I'm saying in terms of injecting some humor in what is quite a depressing time into the marketplace. It will engage people into what you are. It will develop your online personality, and people will remember you for that amongst this noise of 50 different companies in your Facebook feed.
Yeah, I think content is really key in that. At the end of the day, if your content is shit, then people aren't going to engage with it, right? And ultimately, there's going to be a lot of people now that are going to be forced to go down the digital front, and they're not going to have the experience with the content and side of things. So that's when using agencies like Wayne, for example, is really going to kind of work and pay dividends in terms of how you do that. Then again, we come to the whole cash flow problem, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, it is all about where you put your money and where you put your investment, right? So if you're strategic and you go down the agency route to help you with your content strategy, then naturally you're going to have a bit more success with it. But ultimately, you know, this whole concept of content is king and all of that naffness is actually more true now than it has ever been, especially when companies are going digital more and more and more. And then I think from that kind of stuff, consistency. If you're going to have a content strategy, your content strategy needs to be consistent. So if you're going to commit to sharing posts twice a day, for example, then you need to do that twice a day. And ultimately, you know, Wayne touched on looking at your competitors and what your competitors are doing. If they're sharing a post a day, you should be sharing 3 a day. If they're sharing 5 a day, maybe not 10 a day, but the point is you need to try and be doing more than what your competitors are doing. And then ultimately you need to, if you're committing to doing these things and you're sharing great content, then you also need to make sure that you actually fulfill what your content is saying that you're going to do. So don't try and bite off more than you can chew just to save face. So I think that's probably my 3 things there. You know, get a good agency involved if you can, keep it consistent, and don't be a dullard and commit to things that you're just not capable of committing to. So, yeah.
Good advice. I think we have extended well beyond our original planned hour. So I think it's been really, really useful. And thank you everybody that has raised questions and comments. And we're working on additional live Q&A such as this that will be coming up in the not too distant future. So hopefully we'll start to we'll release some details about those over the next couple of weeks. Thank you everyone on the panel for joining us today and giving up a big chunk of your day. I know everyone's incredibly busy with everything that's going on at the moment, so hugely appreciated. If you want to find out more, we'll have links to everybody's websites on pocketmastermind.com. And you can find everybody via the usual social channels, LinkedIn, etc. Full details will be